Pull up any major retirement publication right now. International Living, Forbes, Nomad Capitalist. Find their cost of living estimates for Lisbon, for Chiang Mai, for Bali, for Tulum. Now ask yourself one question. When did they collect that data? Because here is what happened between 2022 and today. Lisbon rents increased 65% in 3 years, faster than any city in southern Europe. Chiang Mai, which publications still list as achievable on $1,200 a month, now routinely runs $1,700 to $2,100 for the lifestyle they're describing. Bali went from a legitimate budget retirement option to a playground for remote working tech workers with salaries that have repriced every neighborhood an American retiree would want to live in. And Tulum, actively marketed to retirees on fixed incomes as recently as 2023, has had 2 consecutive years of rising violent crime, a sewage crisis that made international news, and average rents that have nearly doubled since the pandemic, all while the retirement articles describe it in the present tense using data from 5 years ago. Some of the most widely cited retirement cost estimates circulating right now were collected in 2021 and 2022. That was a different world. That was before the inflation wave hit southern Europe, before Bali's digital nomad surge repriced Canggu and Seminyak, before the peso volatility cycle in Mexico, before Airbnb saturation turned medium-term rental markets inside out in every city a travel publication had ever described as charming. There's a gap between the world these numbers describe and the world you would actually arrive in. We quantified it city by city, category by category: rent, groceries, a restaurant meal, utilities, and a full monthly total. 2022 estimated cost directly against what real expats and verified cost of living trackers report in 2026. Side by side, no averaging, no softening. 6 cities. Some are worse than you think. One of them actually got cheaper, and nobody is covering it. Stay until the end, because that city is the one that opens up a genuine window that isn't in any ranking right now. Here is exactly what we compared and where the numbers came from, because this video is only as useful as its sourcing. The 2022 baseline figures come from the most cited retirement publications from that period. International Living's 2022 Annual Guide, Nomad List Cost of Living Snapshots archived from late 2021 and 2022, and Numbeo's historical city data for that window. These are the numbers that are still being cited, sometimes without date attribution, in articles published in the last 6 months. And city-specific Facebook groups, where retirees and long-term residents are posting actual receipts from the last 90 days. When all 3 sources agreed within a reasonable margin, we used that number. When they diverged, we used the forum accounts as a tiebreaker, because those are people spending real money right now. 5 line items per city: furnished 1-bedroom apartment rent per month, weekly groceries for 1 person, a sit-down restaurant meal with a drink, monthly utilities, and full monthly total for a single retiree living comfortably. Not bare bones, not luxury. The middle lane. Let's get into it. What the rankings still say: $1,400 to $1,700 per month for a single retiree. A furnished 1-bedroom around $850. Groceries $200 a month. A restaurant meal with wine $12 to $15. One of the most affordable capitals in Western Europe. what it actually costs in 2026, rent first, because this is where Lisbon broke the model. A furnished one-bedroom apartment in any neighborhood with walkable access to transport, reasonable safety, and the kind of environment that makes Lisbon worth living in. Príncipe Real, Moraria, Arroyos, Campo de Urique now starts at $1,400 and commonly runs $1,600 to $1,800. The neighborhoods that appear in older articles as affordable, Alfama, Bairro Alto, have been repriced by Airbnb saturation and short-term rental conversion at a rate that has removed most of the long-term rental stock that those articles were priced against. There is a parallel Lisbon that still exists for people who know landlords personally or got locked into a lease 3 years ago. That Lisbon is not available to you if you're arriving today. Groceries at a standard supermarket, Continente, Pingo Doce, are running $280 to $320 per month for a single person eating well. A sit-down restaurant meal with a glass of wine that cost $12 in 2022 now runs $18 to $24 at the same category of restaurant. Utilities, electricity, water, internet average $120 to $160 per month in a mid-sized apartment, Gabastai. That gap, $700 to $1,100 per month, is the difference between achievable on Social Security and requires supplemental savings every single month. It is the single largest cost inflation gap of any city on this list. And the majority of retirement publications are still citing figures that live inside the 2022 column. The publication's still running Lisbon as a $1,500 a month city is not lying to you in bad faith. They collected real data at a moment when that was true. But they haven't updated it, and that inaction is costing real people real money. What the rankings still say, $1,000 to $1,400 per month for a single retiree, rent $400 to $600, street food meals under $2. A comfortable, walkable life in a city with world-class temples, excellent private healthcare, and an established international community. What it actually costs in 2026? Chiang Mai was the original affordable expat city, the template for the entire digital nomad movement, which is exactly the problem. The infrastructure built to attract mobile workers on international salaries has systematically repriced the neighborhoods where expat life concentrates. Nimin Road, the old city center Santitham, rental prices in these areas have climbed consistently since 2020 and accelerated after 2022 when Thailand reopened aggressively to international visitors and the remote work visa conversation pushed demand for furnished apartments upward. A furnished one-bedroom in a neighborhood expats actually want to live in, meaning reliable internet, walkable streets, close to healthcare, and not an hour from anything, now runs $600 to $900 per month at minimum, with newer condos with good internet in the Nimin area hitting $900 to $1,100. Western accessible grocery options at stores like Rimping Supermarket run $250 to $300 a month. A sit-down restaurant meal, not street food, but the kind of establishment the comfortable retirement framing implies, runs $8 to $14.50. But if your monthly budget is built on eating every meal at a street stall, You're not living the retirement the rankings are describing. Utilities in Chiang Mai, electricity in particular, are meaningfully higher than most articles acknowledge. Air conditioning in a city that routinely hits 95 degrees runs electricity bills to $80 to $120 per month in the hot season. Annual air quality events, the burning season from February through April, when agricultural fires push air quality to genuinely hazardous levels, are now prompting many retirees to budget a secondary accommodation elsewhere for that window, which adds cost that no monthly estimate accounts for. The gap is $600 to $1,000 per month. If you have a health condition that makes the burning season a medical risk, that gap widens further. Chiang Mai is still a beautiful city with real advantages. It is no longer a budget retirement destination in the sense that word was used 3 years ago. What the rankings still say, $1,200 to $1,600 per month, villas with pools surprisingly affordable, local food extraordinary and cheap, a spiritual, cultural experience at retirement-budget prices, what it actually costs in 2026. Bali's cost trajectory is different from every other city on this list, and understanding why explains the gap more precisely than the numbers alone. Bali was not repriced by retirees moving there. It was repriced by the arrival of a specific economic demographic: remote workers earning US, European, and Australian tech salaries who needed fast internet, modern apartments, and Western amenities in a beautiful setting, and who were willing to pay European prices to get them. That demand wave hit Canggu, Seminyak, and Ubud, the three areas that appear in virtually every retirement article about Bali between 2021 and 2023, and it did not leave. A furnished one-bedroom in Canggu or Ubud that cost $500 to $700 per month in 2022 now runs $900 to $1,400 on a monthly basis. And here is the complication that no retirement article addresses. Bali's rental market is heavily short-term oriented, meaning a monthly rate requires negotiation and often a 6 to 12-month lease commitment to access, with nightly Airbnb equivalent pricing being the default for anything less. Retirees in Bali forums describe the first 3 months as a rental negotiation exercise that requires arriving with a budget for a hotel while you find something decent that isn't priced for a 2-night stay. Groceries at Western accessible supermarkets in Canggu run $300 to $380 per month. A sit-down restaurant meal is $10 to $18, identical to parts of southern Europe. Local warungs still serve extraordinary food for $2 to $4, but the assumption that a retiree will eat every meal at a warung is the same optimistic accounting that drives every Bali budget estimate into fiction. There is also a visa situation that every article underweights. Indonesia does not have a dedicated retirement visa in the same sense as the Philippines or Colombia. Long-term legal residency for retirees remains a patchwork. The social cultural visa, the second home visa introduced in 2022, and the newer digital nomad visa are available options with different constraints, durations, and renewal requirements. The second home visa requires proof of $130,000 in funds. The rules have been in visible flux, and multiple expat accounts describe unexpected renewal complications. Aldestock, Bali is genuinely extraordinary. It is no longer a budget retirement destination by any standard metric. The publications describing it as one are writing about a specific economic moment that ended. What the rankings still say. Some 2023 vintage articles still describe Tulum as an emerging, affordable retirement option, beachside living, cenotes, yoga and wellness culture, a growing international community. What it actually needs to say in 2026. Tulum's story between 2022 and now has two chapters, and they require separate treatment because only one of them is about cost. The cost chapter. Tulum was never cheap by Mexican standards. The international wellness tourism market had already pushed beachside rents into the $1,200 to $1,800 range for a furnished place by 2022. By 2026, those same properties run $1,600 to $2,400, driven by infrastructure investment, the extension of the Mayan train corridor that increased accessibility and therefore demand, and the continued arrival of international buyers converting long-term rental stock into vacation properties. Out of Steakliv. But the chapter that matters more than the cost update is security. Tulum experienced a measurable increase in organized crime-related incidents between 2023 and 2025, including incidents that directly affected tourists and expats in areas previously considered safe zones. The U.S. State Department's travel advisory for the Quintana Roo state, which covers Tulum, was elevated, and multiple expat forums and Facebook groups for Mexico retirees have documented a shift in the community conversation from "this is amazing" to "this is complicated in ways we didn't expect." This is not a condemnation of Mexico broadly. Mérida, in the Yucatan, has a completely different safety profile and remains a genuinely strong retirement option. But Tulum specifically, which was being actively recommended to retirees on fixed incomes as recently as 2 years ago, is a destination where both the cost data and the security data have moved in the wrong direction simultaneously, and the articles describing it haven't caught up to either. What the rankings still say: Porto as the affordable alternative to Lisbon, $1,200 to $1,500 a month, a furnished one-bedroom around $700, cooler than Lisbon, more authentic, less touristy, real Portuguese culture rather than expat monoculture, what it actually costs in 2026. Porto in 2019 was what those descriptions capture accurately. Porto in 2026 is Lisbon in 2022, which is to say, it has absorbed the expat and tourist spillover from Lisbon's repricing, and it is now on its own cost escalation curve. A furnished one-bedroom in Bonfim, Setafeta, or Macerelos, the neighborhood's most commonly recommended to expats, now runs $1,100 to $1,400 per month. The Airbnb conversion problem that gutted Lisbon's long-term rental supply hit Porto 2 years later and is now fully in effect. Groceries track closely with Lisbon at $270 to $310 per month. A restaurant meal in a mid-range establishment runs $16 to $22. Utilities run $100 to $140 per month. Porto is a genuinely beautiful city with real cultural richness, and it remains meaningfully cheaper than Lisbon in absolute terms. The problem is that it's no longer cheap in the sense that retirement publications describing it as Lisbon's affordable alternative are implying The articles pointing people from Lisbon to Porto as a budget solution are now pointing people from a $2,400 a month city to a $2,100 a month city, which is a real saving, but not the escape hatch the framing suggests. Here is where the video turns, and this is the part no ranking is currently covering. What the rankings said in 2022, $1,200 to $1,500 per month, affordable but with caveats, safety concerns that required significant context, usually ranked 6th or 7th among affordable retirement cities, a city the publications acknowledged without fully embracing. What it actually costs in 2026? The Colombian peso has depreciated significantly against the US dollar over the last 2 years, moving from approximately 3,800 pesos per dollar in 2022 to a range that has at points touched 4,300 to 4,500 pesos per dollar in 2025 and 2026. For a retiree earning US dollars from Social Security, a pension, an IRA distribution, or investment income, that currency move is a direct purchasing power increase. Every dollar you bring to Medellín buys more Colombian goods and services than it did 3 years ago. That is the opposite of what happened in every other city on this list. Simultaneously, Medellín has not experienced the digital nomad demand surge that repriced Chiang Mai and Bali because the persistent international media narrative about Colombia, still processing a reputation earned before most of the city's transformation, has kept the tech remote worker demographic underrepresented relative to its actual current reality. The people who do move to Medellín are largely people who have done serious research. The people who don't are being deterred by a story that's 20 years old. The result? A functioning, modern, well-serviced city where the real costs have moved in the retirees' favor. A furnished one-bedroom in El Poblado or Laureles, the neighborhoods with the infrastructure, safety profile, and community that expats cluster around, now runs $500 to $800 per month in dollar terms, down in real purchasing power from the 2022 equivalent despite nominal peso price increases, because the exchange rate more than offset the local inflation. Groceries at Carula or Éxito, full-service supermarkets with the imported goods and quality that an American palate expects, run $130 to $170 per month. A sit-down restaurant meal at a quality establishment in El Poblado runs $7 to $12. Utilities, electricity, water, internet, which in Medellín's spring climate requires no heating and minimal air conditioning, runs $60 to $90 per month. That is the only column in this entire video where the 2026 number is lower than the 2022 number, and it is not close. Medellín in 2026 is more affordable in real dollar terms than it was 3 years ago, in a world where every comparable destination got more expensive by 30 to 60%. The reason this isn't being covered is that covering it requires explaining the Colombian peso, acknowledging that Medellín's safety narrative has moved significantly without pretending the remaining concerns don't exist, and giving credit to a city that the publication ecosystem has historically treated with arm's-length caution. It's a more complicated story than Lisbon is affordable. It's a more accurate one. The Colombia Pensionado visa, requiring approximately $870 a month in pension income, remains the lowest income threshold of any established retirement visa program covered in any of these videos. Processing in 4 to 6 weeks. Permanent resident class rights from approval An immigration attorney cost of $800 to $1,500 all in. The catch is still Spanish, and it remains a real barrier. Not an insurmountable one, but a real one. Urban situational awareness is not optional, and the State Department Level 2 advisory for Colombia exists for documented reasons. Know the difference between the city of Medellín and the regions that generate that advisory. They are not the same place. But here is what the side-by-side comparison tells you as plainly as numbers can. While every other city on this list got 30 to 70% more expensive since the articles recommending them were written, Medellín got cheaper. While Lisbon's rent gap widened by $700 a month, Medellín's shrank. While Chiang Mai's burning season now prompts retirees to budget a second accommodation, and Bali's visa situation remains in flux, and Porto absorbed Lisbon's overflow, and Tulum's security profile shifted in the wrong direction, Medellín's fundamentals moved in one direction, toward you. Six cities, 2 columns. Here's the fast version of what the data actually shows. Lisbon, 2022, $1,500, 2026, $2,200 to $2,600, gap up to $1,100 a month, the widest single city cost explosion on this list. Chiang Mai, 2022, $1,100, 2026, $1,700 to $2,100. The digital nomad surge tax, paid by retirees who didn't cause it. Bali, 2022, $1,300, 2026, $1,900 to $2,400, repriced from the top down by a demographic with completely different income levels. Tulum, 2022, $1,600, 2026, $2,200 to $2,800, a cost problem and a safety problem, in the same city, at the same time. Porto, 2022, $1,300, 2026, $1,900 to $2,300. Lisbon's overflow absorbed and repriced on its own timeline. And Medellín, 2022, $1,300, 2026, $1,100 to $1,500, the only city on this list where the arrow moved in your direction. Here's the thing about outdated data that nobody in the retirement publishing world wants to say out loud. An article with a 2024 publication date and a 2022 rental estimate isn't journalism. It's a photograph of a city that doesn't exist the way it's being described, and when a retiree makes a life-altering decision based on a number that's 60% below reality, that's not a rounding error. That's a financial crisis in slow motion. Visit before you commit. Check Numbeo and Expatistan for the current numbers, not the article date. Find the Facebook group for American retirees in that specific city and search Croat rent in the group before you search for an apartment. The people already there are posting real numbers in real time, and those numbers are the ones that will matter when you land. The gap between the 2022 cost column and the 2026 reality column is also the gap between a retirement that works and one that quietly runs out of runway 18, months after you thought you'd solved the problem. We've already broken down the Medellín real-world expat experience in specific detail, the neighborhoods, the actual month-by-month budget walkthrough, the healthcare system navigation, and the security practices the expat community there actually uses. That's the video that fills in what the numbers alone can't tell you. It's right there. And if Medellín isn't right for you, if Spanish is a barrier you're not prepared to clear, or the climate or the distance from family doesn't work, we've covered the full comparison of every destination that still has an honest budget window open in 2026. Because some do. You just need to look at the column that's current. The world is wider than most people let themselves believe, but only if you're reading a map that was drawn this year.